Good evening, members. It's 7:30 according to that clock, so we'll get going. So first off, a quick announcement. Welcome to the meeting of Strategy, Finance and Policy Committee. Can I just draw to everyone's attention on page 3 of the agenda, which sets out details regarding fire safety instructions and the webcasting arrangements. So moving straight on to the agenda, item 1, apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Councillor Myers, Councillor John Mason and Councillor Linden. We also have apologies from Councillor Ian Ward in that he's going to be late. He is en route though, so he'll be here shortly. Substitute members, we have Councillor Mrs Deborah Squires-Coleman for Councillor Mason and Councillor Bob Milne for Councillor Richard Linden. I think everybody else is present and correct. So moving on to item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of April 2025. Are the minutes agreed, members? Agreed? Perfect, thank you very much. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations? No? None? Fabulous. Okay, item 4, public questions on notice. Members, we've received one question from a member of the public, which was circulated as a supplementary item. Now, unfortunately, Miss Waite is unable to attend this evening to present her question. However, it's my intention to read it and supply the answer for the purpose of those watching the meeting at home and for those present in the chamber. So the question received from Miss Jill Waite. Can the Chairman of Strategy, Finance and Policy Committee explain on what constitutional authority the consultancy work in relation to local government reorganisation was commissioned from Grant Thornton, which was referred to in the Chair's report on the agenda? Given there's no record of consultation with the Chair of the relevant committee or formal approval from the Chairman of the Council and the leader for unbudgeted spending. So in response to that question, there's a general delegation to officers within Part 3 of the Council's constitution as follows. So the Chief Executive, Strategic Director and Directors, together referred to as the Chief Officers. Each Chief Officer is authorised to act on behalf of the Council in relation to any matters, including spending decisions, within the service areas for which they are responsible, subject to any limitations imposed by any provision in law or within this Constitution. The Chief Executive commissioned the consultancy work in relation to local government reorganisation by Grant Thornton. This followed consultation with all group leaders who all expressed support for the work, and it was not necessary to consult the Chairman of the Council as suggested in the question. The initial proposal for the work was initiated by the former administration who engaged with all group leaders, and we have continued with this collaborative approach. It is perhaps relevant to note that the work commissioned was at a cost of $4,500 and will be net from the reserve of $250,000 that was set aside to support the Council's work in connection with local government reform. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 5, it's the Chair's update. So I trust people will have had a chance to have a look at that. I will just note that the South Street, the details within South Street are still commercially sensitive as we're awaiting contracts to be signed. So if anybody was going to ask any questions on that, just be mindful of what's said. But do members have any questions on item 5? None? Fantastic. Thank you very much. So that report is just for noting. Item 6 is the 24-25 draft outturn report. So members, we will now consider the report of the Strategic Director of Finance relative to the 24-25 draft outturn report. I will hand over to David Dickinson for this, as is its technical report, and then if anyone has any questions, we will open up to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to highlight a few key points in the report. Starting from the front, so the outturn overall was a 2.173 million underspend, but taking into account the use of reserves where 993,000 was used, the outturn was an underspend of 1.180. And I'd just like to highlight that the main reason for the underspend was the £870,000 worth of interest achieved during the year due to high interest rates and a high cash balance, and some grant for some homelessness grant that was paid towards the end of the year. Outside of that, overall, there would be an underspend of about 26,000. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to my team for producing this quite in advance of when the outturn report normally comes to this committee.
Thank you very much, and I would also like to extend my thanks and the thanks for working with Councillor Wilson and I over the last few weeks in explaining the report. Now, members, does anybody have any questions on the report? Councillor Newport?
Thank you, Chair. Just one question, which is page 20, 2.1, on the salary variance. So I've got a question about the use of agency staff, and given the 277,000 adverse salary variance caused by the agency staff, what steps are the council taking to reduce reliance on agency workers in 25-26?
Thank you, Councillor Newport. David, would you like to respond in the first instance?
Thank you, Chair. So this has been highlighted in the report, and it is an issue. There's a positive that it's not quite a fully staffed council, but when you do have quite a good recruitment drive and there are quite a lot of vacancies filled, if the remaining staff are agency staff, then that has put a pressure. And so there will be we're going to carry out. So this is the outturn, and subsequent to this, there's going to be a review of both staffing, also the reserves and capital receipts. But we will be specifically looking at other options around the agency staff and the amounts that's paid.
Of course.
Thanks, David. What are those other options, David? You said other options. What options are they?
So it'll be around the recruiting permanent people, potentially using reserves to cover short-term pressures, and just looking at the cost for each of the agency staff and if it's value for money.
Thank you. If I may just come back in there as well, I think we're all aware that recruitment continues to be an issue. It has been an issue in previous years in the public sector, and that isn't changing, especially with local government reform. It's a difficult space to recruit into. Anybody that follows the council's social media, LinkedIn, or indeed the newsletters that come out will see that there's constantly vacancies trying to be recruited for. And I think we're probably all in support of doing it in the most cost-effective way, but also in a way that ensures our services are delivered and that we don't cause any delays in delivery with projects that we've got ongoing. So I think we all recognise that there's a challenge there, but I thank you, David, for that response. Councillor Wootton.
Would it be fair, Chairman, to say that there are certain operational needs across the council which require short-term resource and the council turns to agency staff rather than actually recruitment for the longer term? Would that be a cost within that element?
That is definitely something that can happen from time to time. But just looking at the spend on agency, well, just on staff in general, and then driven by agency staff, we have got a vacancy factor that's factored in, and so there will be a review of that as well to see. It's part of the budget that was reduced for 25-26, but it is part of the savings that we've got. So that is something that we will need to look at to try and achieve. But the short-term pressures, can be covered by a reserve or through staffing.
Thank you. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Chair. I see in item 4.3, how was the figure of 250,000 to the LGR reserve arrived at, please?
That was in the budget approved by council back in February. it was in there, it was taken from reserves, and then the subsequent meeting on local government reform, where the recommendations to go with the 5 unitary councils, one of the recommendations was about a reserve for 250,000 towards the larger project across the county, if I'm not mistaken. I'll bring in David Dickinson in case he wants to clarify anything further.
Yes, so it was going to be taken from the underspend, which is where it's been taken from here. How we got to 250,000 is an estimate. There isn't a science behind it, because we still it's based on what other councils have spent, but it's not the cost up to, say, 31st of March 2028. It's just to get us to the business case position. There has been some money coming from the government, which is currently has been paid over just over 500,000. But this is just to set aside some money, and if it's not all used, then it could be carried forward to further costs that will happen between now and 2028.
Thanks, Chair. So that 500,000 that's been from government, that's to be split, though, isn't it? And secondly, do we think that 250,000 is going to be enough? I guess is my question.
Yeah, so it will be split between the councils, and I think Harlow are currently monitoring the spend and hold that budget. The 250 will be enough to get us to September. It's just how much there will be required after that, and that is the next part we're looking at. We're currently doing quite a lot of work around the finances. And that's where quite a lot of the money's been spent on consultants. But after September, there will be more certainty over the direction, and then more robust, I would say, budget assumptions can be used going forward.
Thank you, David. And if I may just add, from the last few meetings that I've attended on local government reorganisation, members continue to ask how the money is being spent, how it is being split out, and to ensure that we're not paying for the same piece of consultancy work twice, for example, because there's 2 different strands being looked at the moment, so there is a close eye. But the 250,000 was a question I asked back when we debated it the last time, because it does feel finger in the air, but there is some sense behind it, and it is being closely monitored by the 15 councils. Thank you. Did I see a hand? Councillor Hoy?
Yes, you did, Chairman, thank you. I think it's 514,000. I think if it's split between all 15 councils, it would be about £35,000 each. But if that does happen, would that 35,000 be added to the 250, or would it be within the 250? That's the first question. Do you want me to ask my other questions now, or wait for the answer to that?
Are they related to the same point, or would you rather?
No, they're different.
Okay, David, do you want to come back on that?
So the 250 is for costs that we'll incur internally. So there might be more costs that say Rochford need to cover, as far as produced by having to support LGR within Rochford. So that will be funded from the 250. Outside of that, at some point there will be a calculation of how much each council owes after the 514, and then they'll be invoicing that to us. So it will be after the 514 that we'll have to pay.
So I'd say that would be additional spending probably then, if required, or it'd just be balanced out at the end once we've worked out. Right, okay. Just a couple of questions then on the budget, mainly around. First of all, it's quite difficult because I think this is around the budgeting area, and the fact that we've got £284,000 underspending the homelessness budget. The argument could be that we don't have any homeless, and that's why we've not spent the money. I don't agree that that's the case, and I know the chair doesn't agree that's the case either, from comments she's made in other meetings. So I want to know how are we as a council within the budgeting process going to make sure that we're budgeting better in that area, making sure we do spend this money, because it shouldn't be money in our bank account earning interest. This should be money out there helping homeless people, whether in temporary accommodation or on the streets. So I want to know how that's going to be passed back to presumably the Communities Committee to make sure they get the budgeting right. The Only one more question. The second question is, and this may come under commercially sensitive, I'm not sure. It says that we got 27.7k income due from Fusion. Are we sure we are able to collect that?
Thank you. I'll bring in David shortly. On the homelessness grant, quite right, Councillor Hoy, it's something that I've raised multiple times, and I think I've asked the question of David before, how else are we allowed to spend this money? Because it seems wrong that it's sat there being classed as an underspend if there is anything we can do to support the housing provision. So I will eagerly await that answer from David as well. I'm not sure if we'll be able to give it this evening. And in regards to the Fusion, again, I'll pass that over to David for an answer. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to pass on to Sarah just to answer the homelessness question.
With regards to the homelessness, it is a demand-led service, which is why any underspends from the base budget will then go into reserve so that it can be utilised for following years. So it's not where it goes and then it's left within the council. It's then specifically set aside for the homelessness service for them to utilise for any future services that they require.
Thank you. Did you want to come back on that, Councillor Hoy?
Yes, I think I probably want to echo the chairman's comments about, I suppose I might phrase it slightly differently, that is that ring fence that we can't design new projects around homelessness and use that money, or is it ring fenced then against very, very specific areas that we're unable to spend it? Because I think if we are able to come up with new policies or new initiatives that can help homeless people and use that money, I think that would be ideal, and I think that's what the chairman would like to do as well.
Yes, that is correct. We can use it.
Thank you, and thanks for raising that, Councillor Hoy. And I think you're quite right, that could be a community's piece of work that's looked at to come up with some suggestions to feed back into officers in due course. Thank you. And then just on Fusion, please, David, if you may.
So we've raised the invoice and we sent that to them. I'll get an update as to whether it's been paid or not. But the intention is that that will be paid. But a bad debt provision would have been set aside as part of any other outstanding invoice as at the 31st of March. So we've included the income in the outturn, but potentially if it wasn't paid, then there would be a provision set aside already within the outturn to take into account at least part of that.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Chair. The items that appear in, the entries that appear in item 4 are all properly budgeted for and appear in the council's annual budget. And most of them are underspent, not all, but most of them are underspent. That being so, why are we even drawing money from reserves to spend on things that are in that list when there's already a budget reserved for that we're not using and we haven't spent? Homeless has been a good example. Why are we actually drawing any money from reserves when we should be using it from the working capital that we've got accounted for already?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. David, would you like to answer, please?
Yeah, that's one of the first questions I asked when I started here. So I've sort of left it as it is, as it's been for quite a few years. But we've waited for the outturn, then there'll be a review. We're currently going through a review of reserves and just the way the reserves are used, because it should be spent within the budget, and then if there's an overspend, we can have that discussion. And potentially, if you use a reserve, it could mask an overspend, or it's not the. So there are other options that could be used. So we're just looking at that. But I didn't want to rush through any big changes on the reserves, because it's worked well for this council for many years. But it's just maybe moving towards a more transparent way of reporting the outturn and the quarterly outturns.
Thank you. Any more questions on this report, members? No? Fantastic. So item 6, it is just for noting. So we will note that report and move on to agenda item 7, which is the asset management strategy and framework for 25 to 28. So we'll now consider the report relative to the asset management strategy and framework. think Andy's going to present the report, but obviously everybody should have had a chance to see it, and it's as a result of the working group from last year, last municipal year. So I will now hand over to Andy in case he has anything to add. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good evening. Good evening, members. So this strategy and framework is the culmination of many months of work to develop the principles of good asset management and look at the council's land and property portfolio. The overall document has been prepared in development with the Task and Finish Group, which was set up last year, and those meetings were very productive. They met on several occasions and have been consulted on a number of sections in the final document. Just very briefly to talk you through the document, which is on the contents page, with the strategy that actually forms Appendix A of the report. Section 1, 2 and 3 are general sections, why councils hold land and property and some approach to good asset management. Section 4 is the council's asset management principles, which came to committee in March of this year and were agreed. Section 5 talks about the actual council's land and property portfolio and the categorisation that we used to group the properties to make it easy to review and to look at the properties from a like-minded perspective. And there's some narrative around each of those categories. Section 6 is the priority action plan, which has got 14 actions, which are predominantly there to develop both the asset management service and the actual portfolio themselves. There's a number of actions there that have been rated over the 18-month period, June 2025 to December 2026. And then there is an appendix to the strategy, which lists the general fund assets, which again came to committee in March, and what's been added since, which was as a result of a request, is the electoral ward and the asset category. And as I said when I brought this back to in March, there may well be assets that members are aware of, from a historic perspective. There's not on the list, and obviously happy to take those. This has been the culmination of looking at various asset lists that have been around the authority, and so drawn that as a combination of all those lists. So the strategy is not designed to answer all the specific questions on each asset, but it does set out the direction of travel and a journey that we'll take in order to get the most of the council's land and property asset portfolio. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Andy. And just a quick thank you to the members of the Task and Finish Group for their work on this, and also obviously to the team for pulling together the report and updating it across the last couple of weeks with some of the extra details requested. So I will now open the floor for questions. So do we have any questions, members? Councillor Hoy.
Thank you. I'm going to start off with a rant. I've been a councillor here for 15 years. The very first meeting virtually, I told people I was colourblind. At every meeting, it seems, I have to yet again say that I'm colourblind. I've had help today, so I know from memory which ones are red, amber and green. But I think it's embarrassing for me and for officers that I have to ask this at every meeting. If there is amber, put amber in it. If it's green, write green in it. If it's red, you can't really write red because I can't really see that either. But try and come up with, I could probably work that by default though. But it's embarrassing that I have to say this every meeting. Can that be brought to everyone's attention? And I'm sure I'm not the only colourblind person around. So that's that. I'm now going to move on to the red, amber.
Thank you. That is noted, and I'd like to make sure that officers do that, not just for this report, but for all reports, please. Thank you. And Councillor Hoy, I'll bring you back in. Thank you.
Yeah. So just very brief. I'm not going to. There's not loads of questions. I think the report is very standard. Obviously, it's done under the previous administration as well. So hopefully we're all agreeing it. It's just on the red, amber, and green. And I'm remembering which ones are red and amber and green. There are a lot of red on there, and there's a lot of amber on there. Which there are timetables on. The red, I think it's the third one on the list, is to December 2026. That seems rather a long time to get the red into, presumably into green. So that's the first question I want. Is that the timetable on page 17 of 23? It's got July 26th to December 26th for the red. Is that to get it to green, or is that to get it to amber? It just seems quite a long time to me to do that.
Would you like me to come back on that point first, Councillor Hoyer?
Yes, please. That's the only point I've got, really. It just
Okay.
seems very long. And I know there are issues, and I know this is the first step. But some of these it doesn't seem that if we want to move on this, if that we're not going to get them amber until 2026, it just really delays things.
So first off, I couldn't agree more. Councillor Wilson and I, when we first saw the first draft of the report, there was no RAG system. It was just the entire project was dated up until December 2026. So we asked for it to be broken down into stages so that at least we essentially can work towards something and have KPIs rather than just the entire report being an 18-month project, which didn't feel very manageable in terms of from a member point of view to understand if we were on track or behind. So that's why it's been broken down in the first instance. If members have any feelings or thoughts about anything that should be coloured differently, absolutely now's the chance for us to say it, or we can take it offline and review it. The strategy is a strategy, but RAG timelines are there to be updated. It's my view that it's not turning it red to amber in that timeline, it's completing in that timeline. So by December 2026, we should have an entire green table in front of us, green and labelled in an alternative way as well. But yes, I hear you, and I'm very keen to see things moving forward, which was why Councillor Wilson specifically asked for some closer dates to be put in there for us to manage. Thank you. Did you want to add anything, Andy or Fiona?
Just basically to confirm that. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to break down the 14 actions into what's going to be happening in the next 6 months, what's going to be happening in the 6 to 12 months, what's going to be happening in the 12 to 18 months, and that was the best way of sort of describing it, taking on board your comments about the lettering. So red is not like a danger signal, as you would indicate maybe on other risk kind of registers, but an indication of the time period of which those activities will be taking place.
Yeah, Fiona. Oh, sorry, I think Fiona wants to come in, then I'll bring you back in, Councillor Hoyt.
Clarify what Andy just said. So it's not a red, amber, green in the normal sense. This is more of a timeline then. So red is a longer lot timeline, green is a short timeline.
Yeah, there's a key on the bottom of page 17, and so it's been used as a timeline rather than a risk rating.
I was reading from that originally, but I realised that's what he's now said.
Fiona?
Yes, I was just going to add a couple of points to that. Sorry, can you hear me? I can't get any closer. Just because it's amber or red, it doesn't mean it hasn't started. It just means it won't have finished by a certain date. So you could find there's quite a lot of ambers that will all be running simultaneously from now. And then the other point I was just going to make is these are priority actions. So under these, for most of them, or many of them, there will be proper action, more detailed action plans, which will have much more detailed milestone documents attached to them. So I just thought I'd make that point. This is pretty high level in terms of those priority actions.
Thank you. Any other questions or points to raise, members? Councillor Wootton?
Thank you, Chairman. A number of points and one or two questions amongst them. Chairman, if I may, if I turn to page 50 to begin with, item 1 on that table, operational and car parks, and it would be totally unreasonable to expect an off-the-cuff answer this evening, but I would be curious to know why presumably that's net profit after costs, why that doesn't seem to have risen over the years, because I remember prior to COVID time, us talking in terms of 1.3, 1.4 million as our net benefit from our car park income. And it would just be interesting to know, and I would suggest a separate note. It would be very unfair to expect an answer on the hoof tonight. But it appears to have gone down. Now, clearly, during COVID times, our car parks suffered a dramatic decrease in their usage, but by now I would have thought they would have picked up a bit. So I'm not asking for a specific answer, but I'd be grateful if, in due course, perhaps members here could be circulated with a little bit more detail of the numbers that sit behind that. Unless you felt inclined to give an immediate answer.
I don't have that immediate answer, but I can certainly find somebody who can.
Okay, I just think it's our biggest revenue earning asset, and I think it would just be helpful for members actually right across the council to be aware of what comes in on that.
If I may, Councillor Wootton, on that point, just it may be helpful. Stuart Anderson is doing a piece of work at the moment around car parks and costs overall because of the potential free car parking that's coming forward as an idea through strategy. So there will be a detailed piece of work coming forward which will help answer that question.
Oh, well, perhaps we may just wait for that report rather than cause further duplication. There's certainly no urgency, but I think it would help understanding. Turning to my next point, and it may be simply a question of tenses, but on page 51, 5.12, it talks about Freight House received funding in 2025-26. It just seems a slightly odd tense to use, bearing in mind, I assume that it's ongoing expenditure. So the word received is past tense, but we're only a couple of months into the financial year, and I suspect it should be is receiving.
If I may as well, excuse me, officer, I think I know the answer to this. This is referring to the specific budget for the reopening works for the meanwhile use. So it was a one-off sum of money for the meanwhile use. I take your point about ongoing expenditure, but 5.12 is purely relating to that item, I believe.
That's helpful to understand that as well. Thank you. Turning then to page 54, and we're talking there about at 5.15 Finchfield and the Dutch Cottage. And again, I appreciate that is a trust arrangement, but it would be interesting to hear the latest, and I appreciate it won't happen tonight, but interesting to hear the latest operational arrangements where those assets are concerned. I mean, they're cost neutral, I assume, because the revenue from them goes into the trust. So there may be a capital requirement to maintain them or whatever. But certainly in a separate report somewhere, it would be nice to know what's going on with those, especially as Vice Chairman. I believe that I'm one of the trustees, so I ought to understand a little more about what that is. But again, not asking for a reply specifically tonight. If I may go on, Chairman. Page 55, and I think we come to the table that Councillor Hoy was referring to, and I take his point about colours. But number 4, and it talks about undertaking an environmental sustainability survey. There's a cost to these, and certainly some of our assets are quite ancient, and the EPC is going to probably tell us some pretty appalling data. But what I'm trying to understand what it achieves by getting these. They get out of date, I think, after a while. In any case, it's the cost involved in getting them. So that's that point. I also want to continue to talk about the table, but did you want to take that one yet?
Yeah, I'm happy to come back on that. Again, so energy performance certificates are a requirement in order to lease a property out. You can't lease a property out if it doesn't meet a certain requirement. So it's my understanding from previous conversations that in order to, some of the assets within our portfolio, if we are looking to lease them out, would have to have an up-to-date energy performance certificate. If it doesn't meet the requirement, then upgrades would need to be made before we can lease that out. So it is a piece of work that would be required. Thank you.
I think also the theme of the strategy is also about being able to collect lots of data around our assets. So things like conditions, surveys for future investment, and things like environmental sustainability surveys would be part of that, to build up data around all assets to be able to more accurately predict what the future investment's going to be, and to understand our properties a lot more.
Yeah, I'm going to bring in Fiona quickly, if that's okay.
Yeah, just a final point on that. The council also gets judged on its sustainability performance nationally, something called the climate scorecards, and all of these things and any improvements we can make to make our buildings more energy efficient makes our score better.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Chairman. You'll be pleased to know I'm getting to the end of my list. But just a couple more points. On number 12 on the same table, I'm just wondering what that actually means and how you introduce a calculator. That's curiosity as much as anything. I only got one more point after that.
I'll bring in Andy in terms of how the calculator will be formed.
So with leases, often there is a community and a social value associated with that. So rather than maybe giving a market rent, you may sort of give a discount reliant on those other benefits. And it would make sense, obviously, to have a process of being able to calculate those, and rather than being a calculator as we would think to figure, it's just a series of points which using a number of other authorities to define what that social and community value is, and try to apply a monetary value. So, for instance, volunteer time may be so if you've got a certain number of volunteers, you apply so the kind of amount that they would pay, that they would cost if they were paid, and therefore that's a value that we're getting at that, which can be taken into consideration. So it's a means of being able to calculate and get the transparency and visibility around the social and community value that those groups kind of offer.
Thank you, Andy. And just to add into that, I'd like to think that members can have some input into that piece of work when we get there, because we know the communities, and I think we'd have an input as to what creates a stronger community value across Rochford in some areas than others. Thank you.
Certainly that reply is very helpful, and it helps to quantify the value, but I was just curious to know what was sitting behind the comment. Finally, from me, on pages 58, 59, etc., AMS Appendix A, there's some fairly quaint electoral ward names that, need updating, and I think it's, really a table that could do with updating to current ward names, districts, rather than using some fairly quaint original names. So, because not all of us know exactly what those old ward boundaries relate to. So if we could modernise it a bit and at least bring it up to date, that would be helpful. Thank you very much indeed, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Whitton. Andy, I trust that's a straightforward piece of work. Thank you. Members, any other questions? Councillor Milne.
Just a question to the officer. Looking at all this piece of work, it almost appears to be like something wasn't going on for a long time, and this is a sort of a catch-up. Because we've got a great big list of asset management, performance indicators, and we've got millions of pounds worth of assets we've had. And in the past, we don't seem to have had this kind of professional approach to it, and it must have caused would you agree that it's caused a bottleneck, really having to do all this work now in 2025, when you start to look back over how things got to that point? Because there seems to be an awful lot of stuff here that seems to be just reasonable ongoing management stuff that should have been done anyway. So that's my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. Noting that some of the officers haven't been here very long, but I'll pass over in case they do have a view.
And I think this is an opportunity, obviously, to look at assets in a lot more detail and to reiterate some of the principles that maybe members may not have had reports in the past on this. As Councillor Belton has said, I've been here a year, so looked at all the documentation that the council's got in its assets, and I thought this was a opportune moment to bring all that together, redefine some of the general kind of asset management principles, have some specific principles to the portfolio, and to outline to members what the portfolio comprises. And hopefully there will be some ongoing there will be ongoing reports to members, so that we keep the visibility and the transparency of the portfolio fresh.
Thank you, Andy. I think it's important to note there's lots of work goes on with the assets at all times. There's been leases that have taken place over the years. There's been lots of other things that have gone on. Local government reorganisation has certainly focused the mind where assets are concerned, because some of them are going to be at risk. So I think it's important that this work was done, and I look forward to working with members to deliver it. Councillor Ward?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just want to come back to page 50, if I may. It's just an interesting point that Councillor Wooten made about the operation in car parks and the figure. And he pointed out that it's not as large a figure as he was expecting. And I wonder if this is, we know about COVID, but the approach car park seems to be incredibly empty at times, especially on the reserve spaces, the season ticket spaces. And I'm wondering if that is one of the reasons that there is a slight deficit there.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. I think the appropriate thing will be to wait for Stuart Anderson's report that will break down all of the car parks, because I don't think officers here will know the specific details, but that work is in hand because we do recognise, and I recognise the last administration made some changes to how season tickets work to try and increase the usage of that car park, and it will be interesting to see those reports in due course. Thank you. Any other questions, members? Oh, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you, I'd like to ask the officers, and I'm sorry to go back about the RAG rating, how will we know as time goes on when different elements in the framework are actually actioned? Will there be, I mean, obviously the green will stay green if it's actioned between now and December this year, but will there be an asterisk or some sort of symbol or another column to say that that piece of work has been completed? Just like to know so that when an update comes through, I know what I'm looking at. Thank you.
So, thank you. So the aim would be to have progress when we report back against each of the actions, even the red ones, because as Fiona said, there will be work ongoing for all the actions, and when we report back, there'll be a narrative around where we are with each of the actions.
Okay, that's great, thank you.
Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chair. So if I may throw you to Andy. So is it a RAG chart or is it a timeline? Because now I'm a bit confused because it was referred to as a timeline. Originally a RAG, then a timeline, and now a RAG. Thank you.
It is a timeline, yes. So the green, amber, red is an indication, I say, of the 6 month period for the whole of the 18-month period. So green is say the first 6 months, amber the 6 to 12, and the red the 12 to 18. Just give an indication about the kind of activities that we're doing within those periods. Perhaps it wasn't the best way to.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, as is set out on page 17 as a RAG-rated timeline, but I recognise they're two different things in essence. Councillor James Newport, I think I saw a hand.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair. So, Andy, can we have a copy of the milestone document then, so we can see if it's on progress or not? Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks, members. Any other? Councillor Hoy.
I don't want to be facetious, but I will be. Can we have a RAG system to assess whether the RAG timeline's on time then?
Well, Andy, if we can just have a mechanism that everybody can understand, see, read and challenge on. Thank you, members. Any other points? No. Fabulous. Okay, so we have two recommendations on item 7. Are members happy for me to take these on block, or do you want them separately? On block's fine? Okay, so I'll read them out for the purpose of the recording. Recommendation 1, that the committee approves and adopts the Asset Management Strategy and Framework 25 to 28 as set out in Appendix A of this report. And recommendation 2, that the priority action plan set out in section 7 of the strategy document be approved for delivery as detailed in this report, noting the things that we've mentioned during the committee. So we'll now vote on a show of hands. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous, members. Okay, so moving on to item 8. Is item 8? Yes, the committee work programme. Oh, apologies. I didn't get a seconder for those recommendations. I was too hasty. Councillor Vilma-Wilson is the seconder. Thank you. Okay, item 8, committee work programme. So we've got the report that sets out the work programme for our committee for this municipal year. I will open that up to members for comment or questions. Thank you. None? Okay, so I believe we have one recommendation, which is just to approve the work plan. Do I have a seconder? Oh, Councillor Vilma Wilson beat you to it, I'm afraid, Councillor Milne. By show of hands, all those in favour? Thank you. That is also unanimous. So that concludes our business, and I will close our meeting at 8:15. Thank you.